5 best cameras for beginners in 2026. What's up guys, it's River, and today we're looking at my top 5 cameras specifically for beginners, whether you're just starting out or you're a little bit further along your journey. I have 5 cameras that would be perfect for anyone that's looking to get into both photography and video, and I also made sure to make all of these cameras extremely affordable and give you a really good value for your money. So let's do a deep dive and find the perfect starter camera for you. Let's get into it. By the way, if you're new to the channel, we talk about anything and everything to do with camera gear, from entry-level to high-end professional gear, plus filmmaking techniques to take your work to the next level. So make sure to subscribe for all the fun content we have coming out this year. Also, I'm leaving links down below in the description to all the cameras that we talk about today, plus gear that I personally use to make all my work. Let's get into the video. The first camera on our list is the Canon T7, also known as the world's best-selling DSLR camera. Why? Because it has an amazing 24 megapixel sensor, amazing Canon colors, great autofocus for photos, and it's also extremely affordable. This is the camera that I recommend to most beginners that are just starting out with photo and video. As for photos, it does 5 frames per second with continuous autofocus in full RAW. At this price point, that's really impressive. This camera is really well suited for fashion, portraits, lifestyle. Basically anything that doesn't have a lot of movement. I would not use this camera for sports or action. In terms of video, it does full HD at 30 frames per second with 60 frames per second at 720p. It's unfortunate that they don't have 60 frames per second in full HD, but at this price point, I'm not that upset. When it comes to autofocus in this camera for photos, it is fabulous. It is literally impossible to get an autofocus shot, but with video, it does tend to struggle quite a bit. It's not quite sticky, and it cannot track objects or faces. I would definitely use this camera in manual focus. When it comes to video, however, what makes this camera great are actually the Canon colors. These colors look great right out of the camera, and you really don't need that much editing to get a beautiful image. So if you're a beginner, I definitely recommend getting Canon camera, because you're simply going to save a ton of time, and you're going to get great work right from the start design-wise. It's a really good camera. It's well built. The ergonomics are great and has a really solid battery life. It really doesn't feel like a starter camera. However, there are a few things I don't like about this camera. For example, it doesn't have any digital stabilization. It doesn't have a flip screen, and it doesn't have an external audio jack. But these are probably things I wouldn't need if I'm shooting photos. This camera basically gives you everything a proper photo DSLR would without all the fancy bells and whistles. The Canon T7 is a really good choice as your first photo DSLR. But it's probably not the best for video. If you're looking to do video, I have something perfect for you later in this list. Next up, we have the Nikon D3500. It's a slightly more advanced photo camera and has a lot of what the Canon T7 was missing. The D3500 has a 24 megapixel sensor with a really powerful RAW codec, plus really fantastic photo autofocus and pretty decent video autofocus. Plus, this camera is pretty decent and low light. You get 3200 ISO clean, which is not very common for an entry-level camera. As for photos, it does 5 frames per second in continuous autofocus. However, that's the same as the Canon T7, but the Nikon does not have the same great colors as the Canon camera. So it's kind of a letdown in this department. However, the RAW codec in Nikon cameras is much more powerful than the Canon RAW codec, and you can push the colors and the image overall much further in Photoshop and Lightroom. As for video, it does full HD at 2430 and 60 frames per second, which is something that was missing from the Canon T7. The autofocus for video is still just decent, but it's a whole lot better than the Canon T7. In case you're trying to compare the two design-wise, it's a really well-built camera with a really great layout, plus a really solid battery. This camera would be totally acceptable to do professional work with, and this camera has all the shortcut buttons that I would normally expect to find on my professional DSLR, which makes it extremely easy to use. Sadly, this camera still doesn't have an audio jack or a flip-out screen. However, it does have a built-in guide mode that actually teaches you how to use this camera and teaches you how to do good photography. It's extremely helpful. If you're a beginner, the Nikon D3500 is perfect for a beginner that wants a little bit more horsepower in their starter camera, but they still want to maintain an affordable price point. If you're side video interested in buying a camera that you would normally have to pay hundreds if not thousands of dollars for, I have some great news for you. A lot of you guys know me as the guy on YouTube that reviews cameras, but I've actually been a director and cinematographer working in the film industry for many years. I've traveled all over the globe to shoot projects, and I've worked with some of the biggest brands out there. Not only that, I've also helped dozens of my friends get into video and photography as a hobby, but also turn into a high-paying side hustle. So I wanted to help. I wanted to show you guys step by step how to take your beginner or intermediate level camera and turn that into a high-paying side hustle. Probably the number one reason I hear from people as to why they don't start making money with photography and video, which they love to do, is that they don't have time or money to invest the camera itself. It's already a pretty big investment. So I made this course exactly for those people, someone who doesn't feel comfortable or doesn't want to quit their job right now, but still wants to make a few $1,000s a month, but only working a few weekends. You might be a student who already owns a camera and wants to make a little bit of money, or you might be an accountant or engineer who loves their job, but just wants to make a little bit of side cash for something you want to buy down the road, or you might be somebody that wants to make a career out of photography and video and wants to get the best start possible in the industry. You can get started with the camera you already own or the camera you're about to buy at the end of this video. So if I have your attention and you know you're interested, check out the link in the description down below to get started for the side hustle course. Also, as a bonus, anybody watching this video will get my LUT pack for absolutely free, and you can make your work and your colors look exactly like mine. So be sure to check out the side hustle course. And with that being said, let's get back into the video. Next up, we have the Sony a6000 and its side-by-side video older brother, the Sony a6100. They're still beginner cameras, but both of these cameras have a ton of horsepower at a very affordable price points. Both cameras have a 24 megapixel sensor and blazing fast autofocus for both photos and videos. The a6000 does a whopping 10 frames per second, while the a6100 does 11 frames per second. Both cameras are pretty comparable in power, but the a6100 has a few extra bells and whistles. Both cameras have a really powerful RAW codec. The a6000 does 12-bit RAW, while the a6100 does 14-bit RAW. It may not seem like a lot, but 14-bit RAW is a lot more powerful than 12-bit RAW. The a6000 gives you full HD up to 60 frames per second, and if you set up a flat profile, you can color grade this camera pretty easily. The a6100 blows the composition away with 4K at both 24 and 30 frames per second and full HD up to 120 frames per second. At this price point, these specs are absolutely insane. The e6000 has pretty standard colors right out of the camera, and they really don't look that great when compared to Canon cameras. However, the 6100 has the updated Sony Venice color science, which looks very competitive when compared to Canon cameras, and you get pretty good results right out of the camera if you plan on using the color straight out of the camera without much editing. I would definitely go with the a6100. Both cameras are well made, nice and compact, and really well designed. However, the menu system can be a little bit complex. The one thing missing from both of these cameras is the lack of a microphone input. It would have been really nice to see on these cameras because they're both really good video cameras. However, I don't think that's necessarily a problem. If you're doing a music video, you're going to be syncing up your audio in post anyways, and you're not going to be recording any audio on set. If you're doing a narrative film, you can use the internal mics for scratch audio and then sync up your audio later from your sound guys. So I don't think the lack of external audio is an issue, but it would have been really nice to see. The a6000 has a pretty decent tilt screen for high and low shots. However, the a6100 has a full flip-up screen that actually allows you to see yourself. This is a really nice addition. Both cameras are really well priced with a ton of horsepower and raw speed. If you're a beginner that wants a camera that can kind of do it all, this camera is definitely for you. And the next camera is the Canon SL2. It's a slightly older camera, but it is still a fantastic value. As a beginner, the SL2 has a 24 megapixel sensor, and it does the standard 5 frames per second in full RAW with continuous autofocus. But where this camera really shines is video. If you wanted something like the Canon T7, but with all the bells and whistles for video, this camera is for you. This camera does full HD at 2430 and 60 frames per second with dual pixel autofocus, which is a fantastic auto focusing system specifically for video. It does a fantastic job. It's extremely reliable and very easy to use. Plus, it has digital image stabilization, which makes a huge difference when it comes to shooting video. Sadly, the SL2 does not have 4K. However, most Canon cameras tend to do a huge crop on there sensor when you go into 4K mode, except for the Canon 90D, and I don't like the 4K in most Canon cameras. If you want 4K at this price point, I would definitely go with the Sony A6100, the Canon SL3, which is the update to the Canon SL2, does have 4K. However, I don't think that camera is worth the money, and the 4K does not look very good. The dual pixel autofocus in the Canon cameras does a fantastic job with both photos and videos, and it's pretty neck and neck with the Sony cameras. However, I prefer the Canon camera's dual pixel autofocus simply because the